Okay, we're at the top of the hour. So good day, everybody, and welcome to our Gimmal Education Series for Gimmal Records today. My name is Marcia Shields from our Customer Success team. Our goal for these sessions is to enhance your expertise with our Gimmal software, and hopefully this session will do you a lot of good with Gimmal Records. We are recording, and we will share the recording after the event today. Tim Butler is with me today. Tim, if you go to the next slide too, that would be great. Tim is our subject matter expert, and we'll be talking about Gimmal Records today. He's going to be reviewing how the software can be used to apply records policies to your email. That said too, Tim, next slide would be great. As a reminder, or for those who are attending for the first time, you're earning points for getting a Gimmal All-Star. We're running an All-Star program this year for registering and attending education sessions and taking part in our post-education session polls. So we appreciate you being here, and we want to reward you for your efforts. Today's session will be about 15 to 20 minutes for a product demonstration by Tim, and then we will leave time for your questions after. Questions can be posted in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom bar. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll tee those questions up to Tim once he's finished. Before I hand this officially off to Tim for his demonstration today, we're going to run a quick poll. The question today is, how is retention policies applied to emails within your organization? We'd love to hear your answers and see what's going on in the real world. So I will let that run, and I will report back the poll answers after. Tim, that said, I think I'm done with my part. I will hand this off to you.
All right. Thanks, Marcia. Appreciate it. Yeah, guys, just going to spend a few minutes here today talking about the topic, retention and email. How do you make it work, basically, right? And hopefully all of you on the call today have some records management background and/or you're a records manager right now. If you don't, you're probably in the wrong education session. So I'm going to assume most of you are in that camp. And just want to make kind of an overarching comment right up front, guys, that historically, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but historically, when it comes to records management, amongst all the frustrations and difficulties that you have, two of the chief ones have been historically over the years is number one is getting records classified, getting them into the right record series, the right file plan. All kinds of reasons for that, but that's been a really big problem. And then fast forwarding, of course, through the life cycle of the records themselves at end of life, when they're actually ready to be dispositioned, is getting approval from the owners of those records to say, yes, Mr. or Mrs. Records Manager, you may proceed. And we're going to focus on those two. There are other issues, but those are two really big ones. And we're just going to focus on those two for our little education session here today. So point number one, classifying records. It's really important, right, to be able to get records into a repository, a records management repository, so classification can happen. And that's what we're going to focus on as step one. And with email, right, there's just email everywhere. Some industry estimates say about 80 to 90% of your emails never should be records. They serve other purposes, but they're not records. And those numbers vary. But a lot of stuff doesn't need to become a record. Well, what Gimmal has done to address kind of pain point number one in terms of classifying emails in the first place, getting them into a record series, is via our partnership with Caligo. For those of you that attended the webinar last month, some of this will be a little bit of quick review for you. But here's the basics, guys. With our partner Caligo, what you're able to do is in someone's inbox, and I'm going to open up the Caligo email manager to use him for some show and tell. Here's your options as an end user for everyone who's got email, and everyone does, right? You can either take kind of onesie-twosie approach. That is, you can highlight a single email. You can come over here. We won't have all the time to get into all the bells and whistles here, guys. But you can take a single email. You could add additional metadata if you wanted to. You can separate or attach attachments, keep them together or separate them. And then when you're ready, you simply just click this and you upload it to a preset list of favorites, basically, where you want this to live in SharePoint. Purposefully emphasizing the word SharePoint there, guys, because it's a repository that can be used for records management purposes, pretty much unlike your Outlook or your Exchange. Yes, you can sort of do some rudimentary retention and retention policy there, but it's really not intended for that purpose, whereas a repository like SharePoint is. So point number one, guys, and I'm going to give you 2 or 3 options here, as via, again, our partnership with Colligo, whether it's one email at a time, setting some metadata and clicking a button, you get it up into SharePoint. Really important, because we haven't talked about classification yet. All we've done thus far is get the email into a repository where classification can happen. Now, it so happens with Colligo, nice functionality. You can actually, if you use that little pin right there, you can select multiple emails. But altogether, guys, that's kind of your onesie, twosie approach, right? Each user, each one who's got their inbox, 1 or 2 or 3 or 9 emails at a time, they can load them up into SharePoint. A little better solution that Colligo has come out with rather recently is what you're going to see illustrated over here. You can set up a bunch of folders ahead of time, and I've done that for demo purposes. And the idea here, guys, is rather than individuals doing what you saw me start to do a moment ago, where onesie twosie they use this email manager window, what they can do instead, making it even easier for them, is simply drag and drop emails from the inbox into 1 or more configured folders. Now, they're configured, again, I won't have time to show you all this, but within Colligo Email Manager, you can configure what's known as a bulk copy. Once you've done that, what then happens for the emails that have been dragged and dropped, as you see has already happened with these here, these guys periodically, you can do it as often as you want, are automatically now uploaded into SharePoint. So again, it's the same outcome. You're getting emails into a records repository, in this case SharePoint, but it's even easier now on the end user via drag and drop functionality. There is a third option, guys, I'll just quickly mention here. You can actually kind of ramp it up another level with another product that Gimmal brings to market known as Gimmal Discover. You can use Gimmal Discover and you can configure that product via unlimited number of logical rules, including various wildcards and proximity searches and something known as regex and Boolean logic and all this kind of technical gobbledygook talk, which all boils down to you can create logical rules to automatically now move these emails into the appropriate folder. In that scenario, guys, almost no impact on end users. All 3 of those options, guys, from the inbox are getting emails, in our example here, up into SharePoint. So really quickly here, let's just jump over here. Let's go, yeah, let's come back here, jump into SharePoint. Notice nice little shortcuts within Colligo Email Manager. You can just click this guy right here and open up your SharePoint repository. So here's something I've got locally. I've got a SharePoint site out there housing contracts. If we come back for just a moment, I'm going to actually sort this guy to save us just a little bit of time. And I want you to just focus your attention on this email, which is now in SharePoint as a title of latest contract. If I jump back over here to my inbox, where did this come from, guys? It came from this folder right here, because prior to the demo, of course, and you can see the dates and times here, where actually I just dragged and dropped that inbox email into this folder. It was then subsequently and automatically uploaded into SharePoint, this email with the title of latest contract. So it now lives in SharePoint. So you inherit all the benefits that SharePoint offers there. You will note for this that the metadata, we can capture any metadata you want that's specific to an email. I'm showing some of it right here in the properties panel within SharePoint. So that's kind of step number 1, if you will, or step 0 really, is you're getting the content, in this case emails, into a records ready repository, again at SharePoint. Now, kind of second half of the webinar here, guys, or the education session is, okay, now that it's in SharePoint, how do we apply retention policy? Hence the title of our session here today. Well, I'm going to kind of show you the end from the beginning, guys, because this doesn't happen instantaneously. It takes a number of minutes. But here I am now in our Gimmal Records product. which via a series of commercial connectors, in this example, we're talking about SharePoint, there's a connector constantly crawling through SharePoint, and over time, it has found different content. And here's that same record right here. If I focus your attention on this tile, I've got that latest contract. Let's go to a little properties view here. You'll notice amongst a bunch of information, one of the things that has happened is that connector, as it crawls through SharePoint, it has classified that into a record class known as LEGO1. Here's the URL, right? This is the URL that points me right back to SharePoint where we were. Now, sort of the obvious question is, well, this is cool. It moved that email into a records class, so it's classified, right? Where we can now apply the policy and eventually leading up to eventual disposition. Well, how does Gimmal Records do that? It does that via primarily two components I'll have time to show you here today. Number one is classification rules, which I'll jump to in a second. But to save a little bit of time, I want to focus your attention down here below. When those classification rules, a rules engine, which is also automatically running, when it applies its logic and steers this email into LEGO1, here is the life cycle by which it will abide. And I'll give you another view of the life cycle in a moment. But just to level set with you guys, the emails in the inbox, they got moved up into SharePoint one way or another. Gimmal Records is crawling SharePoint. It's using classification rules engine to steer this content into a record class, in this case, LEGO1. With that, let's try to get to the end and complete the story here as quickly as we can. Here's my overall file plan or record schedule. I'm going to jump you down to that class, LEGO1. And first, we're going to take a look at the classification rules. Now, I know there's a lot of information on this page, guys, but really all I want you to capture here is this is completely configurable by you as the end user. And on the whole, it's a one-time effort. Once you get these rules set up, you are done. Where I want to focus your attention here, the rules can be quite complex, accommodating all kinds of repositories. But really, I just want to focus your attention on these top two rows. Ahead of time, we configured a classification rule that said, if the SharePoint content type equals contract, well, that's what my record is. If you were paying real close attention to the properties panel there in SharePoint, it was a content type of contract. And just to make the logic a little more complex, if the contract type, which is custom metadata now, as long as it's not real estate, this is where our rules engine says you email message that now lives in SharePoint, you belong to me, and you are now under LEGO1. Excuse me, if we go take a look now at the life cycles for that particular record class, and I'm going to jump you down just a couple of pages here. The life cycle in question, again, if you were watching really closely, is contract's general 3-year life cycle. Let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail here. And again, these life cycles can be as simple or as complex as you want. But in the end, here's what the life cycle does for records that wind up in LEGO1. There was an end date piece of metadata on the email itself. And what we're saying here is immediately when it's in SharePoint and the end date is filled, which it was, declare that record, which means lock it down. It can no longer be changed. It's now an official record. And then at the end, 3 years later after declaration, actually set that up for dispose and delete. That's exactly what policy now is being applied. So if we come down there one more time to that latest record, or latest contract, we come back and look. Here's where this record is, right? When we found it in SharePoint, when it was declared, and then when it is now eligible for retention out there in 2028, which shows down here in the graphical view. Going to wrap it up here, guys, with eventually, when 3 years go by in this example, that record will now be visible in what we call the disposition inbox. And to cut through the clutter here a little bit, I'm going to filter the inbox by the class LEGO1. Now, that particular email message is not in my inbox yet because it's not due until 2028. But one day, in fact, in 2028, it will show up in here. And then this is what enables end users very quickly and easily. They can do the whole inbox. They can do a subset of records or one at a time. They can simply approve of the disposition. I want to mention one more point here quickly, guys. That's a growing trend within the industry. 20 some years ago when I started, this was basically unheard of. I'm going to jump you back to that life cycle and just call out one additional piece of information. You will notice down here in phase 2 that 3 years after declaration, we set it up for disposition and delete, but we also check the box that says require approval. Guys, historically, everyone has always, and I know I'm overgeneralizing a little bit, but everyone has always required approval of records at end of life before you actually push the magic button that deletes the content. Well, guys, what we're actually seeing from the vendor perspective is a growing trend amongst the industry that says basically this, just by virtue of having ingested a record into the system of record, in this case, SharePoint, monitored by Gimmal Records, by virtue, Mr. Records owner, of having done that, you have already implicitly given us your approval for disposition. Now, I know for some of you that might just be, oh my gosh, Tim, we can't do that. I get it. It's still an uphill battle, but we are seeing a growing trend in the industry. And what's really nice about this, of course, is that second big hurdle we talked about up front, where you're waiting, it seems like forever, for records owner to approve of disposition. Well, if you apply that implied approval model, you no longer have to do that. What that equates to, of course, in Gimmal Records is you would simply uncheck that box, which means it will automatically be ready and dispositioned when it reaches that 3 years after declaration. So guys, just to summarize everything we said there really quickly here before we jump into a Q&A time here. 2 big hurdles we're trying to help you with here. Number 1 is classification via our partnership with Colligo, a pretty effort-free way of getting emails up into a system of record like SharePoint so that they can be, hurdle number 1, they can be classified automatically via the classification rules engine, those constantly running crawlers that crawl through the content, and then end of life, even if you do still have to require approval, making that much easier for end users to do that. Or maybe one day soon, you'll say, you know what? You don't even have to require that approval, making that step even easier and basically removing that last hurdle. All right, with that, I'm going to stop talking at you guys and I'm going to go look at the Q&A. So, Marcia, if you would help me out, any questions that came through?
Yeah, we do, Tim. First question is, how would you apply a hold?
Great question, guys. And this, I'm going to broaden the question a little bit. It's certainly not specific just to the email, but really any records, like any good records management tool, you have a way of creating legal holds. And very quickly, just to go one level deeper, you can take individual records. You can right-click within Gimmal Records and say, put them on hold and pick from a list. But what's really cool about the functionality in Gimmal Records is you can create what we call legal cases. And when you do this, you create a legal case or hold, but then you can also associate to that hold a set of logic rules. So it will now crawl the repository, SharePoint, based upon whatever metadata you say, like, hey, any contracts that mention Tim Butler, if that's in the metadata, we can automatically apply the hold. By the way, guys, I didn't mention this up front, but Gimmal Records, it manages your content in place. In our example here today, it's SharePoint. And when it declares the record, when it applies a hold, when it dispositions the record, it uses native SharePoint functionality. And so you'll notice that if we go back, actually, let's go back to the SharePoint. You'll notice these little lock icons here, if you can see that on your side. Those are a result of these records having been declared, which is another way of saying lock that record. So whether it's via declaration or a legal hold, we can lock those records within SharePoint to keep people from modifying and, or in the case of disposition, deleting the record.
Nice, thorough answer, Tim. That's great. Another question for you. What are best practices around a single email versus an email that's part of a thread? Is the thread the record, or does it have to be the original email each time?
Yeah, great question. And it's actually a topic of debate within the industry. So I'm going to give you our considered opinion. as a vendor, having worked with lots and lots of clients over time. So when you say best practice, I'm going to put it in air quotes because I still believe this is the majority opinion, that when it comes to multiple emails, all part of the same conversational thread, that each individual email that you deem to be a record, right, by using the functionality we talked about earlier, by moving it into SharePoint, each individual email is actually a record in and of itself. So whether it's a single email or one that's 50 emails long because of the conversation that ensued, each one is a record. So that's kind of part one to the answer. Part two to the answer, however, is one of the nice pieces of functionality about the Gimmal Records solution is when it comes actually time to disposition records, you can use what's known as case level functionality. And again, won't have time to get into all the details, but what this means, and this is just one example here, where you can actually aggregate all of those emails by a common piece of metadata, which would be the conversation ID that's available to us as a piece of metadata coming out of Exchange. You can then, when it comes to disposition, actually approve and delete them as a whole, or as what we call a case within Gimmal Records. So each email is its own record, but then ideally, end of life, you can disposition them in aggregate.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. One more question, unless others want to throw up questions in the Q&A, please do so. The question is there a way to fully automate the classification of emails without user intervention?
Yeah, there is, and apologies, guys. That tells me I've been talking too fast, and I'm sure I was. But option three, when I was talking about the getting stuff out of the inbox up into SharePoint, your system of record, option three, kind of the gold standard, if you will, is via a tool like Gimmal Discover, another product that we bring to market. The Gimmal Discover tool, guys, it allows you to configure as many rules as you want, all based upon the metadata and the content of the email itself. So one quick example right here in my inbox, I've got, this sample email. You could create a rule within Gimmal Discover that says, hey, anytime you see words like this, we want to automatically move that into a folder which has been configured to automatically load into a particular SharePoint library. In that library, Gimmal Records then has a preset rule that says how long we're supposed to keep that record, what record class it belongs in. So to say it another way, yes, you can fully automate with Gimmal Discover, but to manage your expectations, guys, it does mean in Gimmal Discover, you've got to spend the effort up front to create a set of rules that will accommodate as many variations as you can think of. This is not AI. I want to emphasize that point. It's really interesting configurable logic, but it hasn't quite crossed that bridge to AI yet. One day, my answer to your response will be, yeah, you do that via AI. But that day is not the day.
Great. All right, cool. Thanks, Tim. That is all the questions. You were off the hot seat, Tim. Good job. Good job. I want to report back before everybody dismisses here. Our poll question. Thank you for answering. Great, great participation. We had over 80% of people participated. So the question was, Tim, I don't know if you can see this particularly, but how is a retention policy applied to emails? It's a really good mixed bag. 31% said it is not applied at all or very rarely. 31% said it is applied via native Outlook or Exchange functionality. 15% said it is applied with assistance of the third-party tool. And finally, 23% said it is fully automated based upon configurable rules or logic. So,
I don't think, Marcia, I can display the poll. I think you'd have to show the results. But
yeah, that's okay. All right, I already moved it off, but yeah, so that was good. Okay, so everybody, thank you for attending. Thanks for putting the screen up, Tim. Appreciate that. Yeah, we hope you enjoyed today's session. This is the remaining schedule for Q2, so we do have a lot of other things coming up with Gimmal Physical and Gimmal Discover product. You can register or see any of those events plus others where we're going to be at events-wise and any webinars that we're hosting at gimmal.com/events. Again, these sessions are offered a couple times a month. Feel free to join any session, even if you're not currently utilizing that product. If you have ideas that you would like us to consider for future education sessions, please do email those to me or your Gimmal rep, and we'll be happy to add those to the list. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.